So let your body settle. Take a long, slow breath in and out. Close your eyes and imagine you're on a train hurtling towards the sunset. Feel the rhythm of the rails beneath you. Hear the lonely whistle cut through the twilight. In the morning, the cold seeps into your bones as you pull on your boots, stiff and creaking. Outside, the wind whispers over the grass, carrying the scent of sage and something else, something wild and untamed that stirs a primal fear within you. Your skin prickles with heat, your throat grows dry, and the familiar landscape of your face takes on a stranger's features, etched and lined by sun and wind and time. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the land, you finally see the distant form of a homestead, a small cluster of buildings huddled together against the vast emptiness. Relief floods you. You're not alone. You think of water, cool, clear water, and a sudden sharp pain pierces your gut. You haven't drunk enough. You must find water. If you want to hear more stories like this, please stay tuned. Today will be hard. That much you know. See the last rays of sun glisten on the dusty tracks ahead. She turns from the view, her face lined and weathered like the landscape itself, and a wave of sadness washes over you. In her eyes, you see a lifetime of struggle, a quiet dignity, and a profound loneliness that echoes the vast emptiness of the prairie. Let your eyelids grow heavy. The temperature drops sharply, but there's no wood to feed the fire, no blanket soft enough to ease the ache in your bones. The stars blaze coldly in the inky sky, offering no warmth, no comfort. The wind rises, whipping across the plains, carrying with it the mournful cry of a distant coyote. You huddle in the corner, trying to shut out the cold, trying to shut out the sound. But the prairie is vast and the night is long, and the cold seeps into your very bones. And you wonder, not for the first time, if this life is worth living. Let the sounds of traffic fade into the background. But the sun is rising again, and the endless day stretches before you, hot and dry and full of work. You step outside and the wind hits you, bringing with it the smell of sage and dust and a strange, wild freedom. And for a moment, you feel a strange sense of peace. Despite the hardships, despite the loneliness, there's a raw beauty to this life, a kind of stark, untamed grace that resonates deep within your soul. Maybe this is why people come to the desert, to be stripped bare by the elements, to confront the harsh realities of existence, and in doing so, to find a strange kind of solace. Maybe it's in the solitude of the prairie that the soul finds its truest test, its most profound challenge, and ultimately its greatest reward. Don't try to fight them. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to understand them. Let the thoughts drift through your mind. They don't belong to you anymore. Not tonight. Not this evening. Not while you're here. The lights are low, the blanket's warm, and the day is behind you now. Let yourself sink into the cushions. Let the cares of the day fall away. We're heading west. Not to the glamorous gold rush west of movies. Not the heroic frontier of saloon shootouts and sweeping orchestras. No, this is the real American Wild West. Dusty, harsh, lonely. A place where water was a luxury, where sleep was brief and uncomfortable, where boots were stiff, soap was rare, and death could arrive by accident, snake bite, or a single bad meal. Forget the myths. Tonight we'll walk slowly through what it really meant to spend a day, just one long, blistering, bone-tired day on the 19th century American frontier. You wake before sunrise on the dry prairie, no bathroom. The sun climbs higher, turning the sky from blue to a harsh, unwavering white. Hours pass without pause, stretching the day taut like a drumhead. The landscape, a monochrome painting of sky and dirt and scrub brush, broken only by the occasional lone tree, gnarled and twisted by the elements. You adjust the brim of your hat, squinting against the glare. There's no shade out here, no respite from the sun's relentless gaze, and as the hours crawl by, you feel yourself changing. But first, there are fences to mend, cattle to herd, coyotes to scare off. The never-ending tasks that mark each day on the frontier. Inside the house, a woman stands by the window watching the sunset. Night falls quickly in the high desert. As dawn breaks, you rise stiff and aching, wondering if today will ever end. This is the sound of one full day on America. Howdy, partner. Ready to get up for another day of sweating, scrapping, and scrounging for supplies out on the frontier? Well, slap on your dust-caked Stetson and pull up your britches, 'cause we re-moseying on over to the saloon and general store to get ourselves some grub before we head out. No, siree. There's all kinds of dangers lurking in these parts. Never camp so close to a fire hazard that you gotta run for your life if the winds pick up. Always keep an eye on those winds. One minute it might be a gentle breeze, and the next it's a full-blown dust storm. Where do you even find these materials out in the middle of nowhere? You know how to find your way around the wilderness, build a shelter, and find food. Remember, partner, if you ever find yourself stranded in the Wild West, just follow these tips and you'll be back on the wagon trail in no time. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. See y'all next time. All you need now is a good weapon. But I hear you crying. I don't want to hurt nobody. Well, son, this ain't no Sunday school picnic. Out here, it's every man for himself. And if you ain't prepared to defend yourself, well, you're just asking for trouble. Now, I'm not saying you gotta be a shooting fool, but you gotta have a gun on you at all times. And not just any gun will do. You need a reliable six-shooter that'll stop a charging bear or mountain lion in its tracks. As for me, I'm partial to Colt revolvers. They're expensive, but they're worth every penny. And don't forget to practice your draw. Quick draw, slow draw, fancy draw. You never know when you're gonna need it. And if you're one of them fellas who thinks a gun's too much, you should probably just head on back to civilization. 'Cause out here, you need to be prepared for anything. Well, that's where my next skill comes in handy, identifying useful plants and animals for food, medicine, and shelter. This ain't no time to be a picky eater. If it's green and grows in the ground, chances are you're gonna try it at least once. My personal favorite is prickly pear cactus. Not only are the pads tasty and nutritious, but you can also use the spines to fashion into a makeshift knife. And don't forget about the blossoms. They make a fine tea. And if you happen to come across a patch of wild onions, well, consider yourself lucky. These little guys grow all over the place in the spring and early summer and are just about the most delicious greens you'll ever taste. Of course, you gotta be careful what you eat out here. There are all kinds of poisonous plants and mushrooms that I'll put you down for the count faster than a rattler's rattle. So be careful and don't eat anything you can't positively identify. You gotta be ready to pack up and move at a moment's notice. Follow these 3 tips and you'll be safer than a coyote in a henhouse. Well, almost. Like rattlesnakes, flash floods, and even mountain lions. So you gotta know where to pitch your tent to stay safe. It's not rocket science, mind you. Just follow these 3 simple rules. First off, never camp near a dry wash. I don't care how convenient it might seem. The second the rains come in, you're gonna get washed away. I once saw a family get caught out in one of them flash floods. They tried to hold on to their tent pegs, but it was no use. It all happened so fast. I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if it's gonna float all the way down to Yuma. Speaking of tents, never camp underneath a dead tree. You see that big fella over there? Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If God wants that tree down, nobody's gonna stop him. Now this here's our shack. Sure, it ain't much, but it's home. Now, what's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Right, that's right. Build a shelter. I ain't no room in the Wild West for tenderfeet who can't hack it without their mama as apron strings, and that includes you. You need to learn how to protect yourself from the harsh elements and build a shelter that I'll stand up against the toughest storms the desert can throw at ya. Now you could go fancy like my pal McLeod and construct yourself a teepee. Teepee. I always get confused about that. Anyways, those things are great. Warm, sturdy, and easy to put together. Just make sure you got plenty of poles and canvas to spare. Or you could go the hobo route and build yourself a lean-to out of whatever materials you can find lying around. Just remember, the lean-to won't protect you from much more than the sun and the wind. If it gets too cold, you'll freeze your backside off. And that brings us to the most important tip of all, insulation. Don't underestimate the power of a good insulating layer, whether it's leaves, hay, or old saddle blankets. You need to trap a layer of warm air inside your shelter to keep the chill winds from blowing right through. Proper insulation can make the difference between a cozy night's sleep and a trip to the nearest jail cell to warm up. And if you're still shivering after all that, well, there's always the option of building a campfire. Just be careful. These desert undergrowth can get mighty hot, and you wouldn't want to accidentally burn down the whole forest, would ya? You shake off the dust and get yourself some breakfast, a hearty meal to get the blood pumping and the grit grinding. But we ain't got much to work with. A crusty piece of bacon rind, a couple stale biscuits, maybe an onion so rotten it'll make your eyes water just to look at it. But we're resourceful, ain't we? We know how to turn a buck into a boar and a prayer into a feast. Heck, sometimes we'd kill a jackrabbit just for the whiskers. Scrappy as we may be, though, after gnawing on these dry biscuits, we ain't got the heart nor the energy to catch ourselves a jackrabbit today. So it's time to mosey on down to the general store. Right. First off, let me introduce myself. I'm here to show you how to live, work, and thrive in the untamed wilderness of the American frontier. Let's start with the basics. How is a person supposed to go about their daily routine when they knee deep in the wild frontier? With grit, determination, and a good sense of humor. Plus, if you're watching this video, you must have found my treasure map leading to my lost gold mine. Which means you need a place to lay your weary head at night while you rest up from your busy day of panning for gold. Why, just last week I met a fella who was trying to strike it rich out on the Humboldt sink. He dug himself a proper campsite, made himself a fine shelter, and set up his cook stove nice and proper. But you know what happened? His tent leaked like a sieve in the rain. His shelter collapsed on him during a rainstorm, and he burned his only pot and pan when his cook stove went out. Ain't that right, Jim? Yep, I reckon you learned your lesson there, son. Yes, sir. You need to learn the fine art of desert survival. And it all starts with picking a good spot to camp. Out here in the desert, it's not just tumbleweeds and cacti as far as the eye can see. And finally, always have a proper escape plan. So after choosing a proper campsite, what's the next most important thing to do? Now, let's say you've followed all these tips and built yourself a proper shelter and all. Well, partner, it's clear to me you've got the makings of a true desert survivor. Well, that's all the time we got for today. This is a sponsored episode brought to you by today's guest. Today we'll be exploring the world of a desert nomad in the 1800s. This will be a first-person narrative where you play the role of a desert nomad living in the 1800s. Your life is harsh, unrelenting, and unforgiving. As far as the eye can see, there's nothing but endless desert. You wake with the sun and work until it sets, finding solace in the predictability of your existence. It's a feeling that's foreign to you, unwelcome, and you try to shake it off. In the solitude, you discover a newfound strength, a resilience born of necessity and nurtured by the unforgiving landscape. You've come to realize that true strength isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and spiritual. The desert has tested you, pushed you to your limits, and in doing so, has revealed depths of strength you never knew you possessed. As you continue to navigate the challenges of your existence, you do so with a deeper understanding of yourself, your emotions, and the world around you. You've found a way to thrive in the harshest of environments, and in doing so, you've discovered the true meaning of survival. But it persists, nagging at the corners of your mind. And if you enjoyed this experience, we invite you to explore more of our content where you can immerse yourself in a variety of historical narratives. Thank you for listening, and remember to tune in next time for another journey through time. Perhaps it's the isolation of your existence, the endless expanse of desert that stretches as far as the eye can see. Or maybe it's the realization that your life here is a solitary one, devoid of the companionship you've always yearned for. Whatever the reason, this unexpected wave of loneliness washes over you unexpectedly, catching you off guard. You feel like an island in a sea of sand, cut off from the warmth and camaraderie of human connection. It's a sobering realization that shakes you to your core, reminding you of the complexities of the human heart. The sun rises and sets, marking the passage of time with unwavering consistency. Each day brings with it the same chores, the same scorching heat, and the same oppressive silence. You continue your existence, a solitary figure against the backdrop of an unforgiving desert, but within you, a change has occurred. The quiet contemplation of your existence has forced you to confront the complexities of your emotions. You've learned that life, even in its harshest forms, is a tapestry woven with threads of joy, sorrow, hope, and despair. And it's these very complexities that make it so precious. Yet there are days when the harshness of the environment seems almost unbearable, when the relentless sun beats down with particular ferocity, turning the world into a shimmering mirage. On such days, the very air seems to conspire against you, making every step feel like a battle against unseen forces. You question why anyone would choose to live in such a place, why your ancestors had toiled to tame this unforgiving land. The answer, of course, lies in the very nature of survival. It is a testament to the indomitable spirit of man that compels him to persevere in the face of adversity. What's more, your family has lived here for generations, and this land, for all its harshness, is in your blood. Besides, where else would you go? There's nowhere else. This is the West. You were born here, raised here, and you will die here. And yet life goes on. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of burnt umber and blood orange. The temperature drops dramatically, bringing with it a blessed respite from the day's sweltering heat. As twilight deepens, the air takes on a clarity that's almost intoxicating after the haze of midday. You scan the darkening landscape, searching for signs of life, anything to break the monotony of endless sand dunes and scrub brush. In the distance, you see them, the silhouettes of your neighbors, their homes stark against the fiery sky. For a moment, you feel a pang of envy, wishing for the comforting glow that emanates from those dwellings. But it's a fleeting emotion, quickly chased away by the practical concerns of the evening. You must secure your animals for the night. Untie the stubborn cow from the fence, coax the chickens into their coop, and lead the horse to the stable. Each task is a silent ritual, a well-worn routine that has become second nature. Once everything is settled for the night, you turn to your own dwelling, a small shack of weathered wood and corrugated iron. It offers little protection from the elements, but it's a haven nonetheless. Stepping inside, you're met with the familiar sights and sounds of your solitary existence. A single lantern casts long shadows on the dirt floor. The walls are adorned with the tools of your trade, a reminder of the endless chores that await you in the morning. Despite the solitude, you're not truly alone. The silence of the desert night is filled with the comforting sounds of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. It's a lullaby that has cradled countless generations of desert dwellers before you. By late morning, the soft chill of dawn has vanished, replaced by a relentless sun that climbs high into a sky bleached nearly white. There are no clouds to offer shade, no trees tall enough to hide beneath, and no gentle breeze, only dry, stifling heat that settles on your skin like a thick wool coat you can't remove. The land is parched and cracked, stretching endlessly in all directions. Dust clings to everything, to your shirt, your throat, the corners of your eyes. Every breath feels like inhaling grit. You sweat, of course, but it evaporates almost instantly, leaving your skin coated with salt and your mouth perpetually dry. Water is precious. You ration it, a sip here, a careful swallow there, enough to keep going, but never enough to feel quenched. The chores, however, wait for no weather. You've got to tend to the animals. The horse needs brushing, its hooves cleaned of stones. The chickens, if you have any, need feeding, though they peck impatiently at the dirt, clucking in frustration. You refill the troughs if the well hasn't gone dry again. If it has, you haul water by the bucket from whatever stream is nearest, or what is left of one. There's firewood to chop always. The kindling pile shrinks faster than you can rebuild it. Splinters drive deep into your palms, and your shoulders ache with every swing of the axe. The work is endless, patching the fence, fixing the roof, scraping rust from tools, sweeping out the barn where flies swarm thick as fog. Even the simple task of walking becomes a trial, your boots baking hot, the leather stiff, and the solace worn thin from use. Clothing offers no relief. The long sleeves, heavy canvas, and thick hats are meant to protect you from the sun, the wind, the thorns, but they trap the heat close to your body. You feel like you're boiling inside your own skin. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of yourself in a pan of water or a piece of broken mirror, red-faced, streaked with grime, sun-creased far beyond your years, and then there's the silence. It's not peaceful, this kind of silence. It's the kind that hums in your ears, broken only by the buzz of insects or the occasional distant caw of a hawk circling something already dying. Out here, alone with your thoughts and the oppressive heat, even time feels slower, heavier, like the sun itself is weighing you down. You might find yourself wondering why you endure this existence. Why not pack up and leave? To which I ask, where would you go? As the days melt into weeks, you continue your endless routine. One evening, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, you find yourself struck by a sudden bout of loneliness. The harsh beauty of the desert surrounds you, and you find a strange solace in its unchanging routine. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of a desert nomad in the 1800s. This episode was brought to you by our team. Howdy, partners. Are you tired of all the fancy bath products, shower gels, and soaps that are tough on the earth and tougher on your wallet? Well, fret not. Today we will show you how to make your own all-natural soap with simple ingredients that you can pick up right at the general store. Just like the one that I used to cook up some tasty tripe and sawdust soup earlier today. First thing you want to do is get yourself a big iron kettle like this one here. Make sure it has one that you don't plan on using for cooking anytime soon, because this next part is gonna be a real messy. Set your kettle over the fire and get it good and hot. The earliest evidence of soap making dates back to ancient Babylon as far back as 2800 BC. Wet your hands and face and start lathering up. Be sure to massage your skin to help improve circulation and exfoliate dead skin cells. Rinse off with cold water and admire your newly clean and healthy looking skin. And don't forget to save the scraps. Scraps of soap left over after washing your face or hands can be saved and used for cleaning other things around the house like windows and mirrors. Just rub the soap on the surface and wipe it clean with a cloth. Voila, the Babylonians used a combination of animal fat and ashes to create a soap-like substance that they use for cleaning purposes. Plus, you'll never have to worry about chemicals, artificial colors, or fragrances again. So why wait? Give it a try. And remember, in the Wild West, a clean face is a happy face. The ancient Egyptians also used a form of soap made from animal fat and plants like laurel and myrtle. During the Middle Ages, Soap making was an important part of the domestic economy, with women making soap at home for their families and communities. In the 17th century, soap making became a commercial industry with the establishment of the first soap factories. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, soap making continued to evolve with the discovery of new ingredients and manufacturing processes. Today, soap making is still a popular hobby in small scale business, with people around the world making their own unique soaps using traditional and modern techniques. Once it's hot enough, grab your fat and cut it up into small bits and throw it in the kettle. Next, grab your lye and put on your goggles. Then slowly and carefully start adding the lye to the fat, stirring it around until it's all combined. Be careful here because the lye is caustic and will burn your skin. So if you ain't got them goggles on, you might want to keep your hand out of the pot. Once the lye is all dissolved, take it off the heat and let it cool. This one, though, has a special lining. See this right here? This is called soap. Saponification, or soap making, is a chemical reaction between a fat or oil and an alkali, in this case, lye. When these two ingredients are mixed together, they undergo a chemical reaction that produces soap and glycerin. The soap is formed by the alkali salts of the fatty acids present in the fat or oil, while the glycerin is formed by the remaining components of the fat or oil. This reaction is exothermic, meaning that it generates heat. In fact, that's how we're cooking this soap right now. The heat is being generated by the reaction between the hog lard and the lye. The amount of lye needed to completely react with the fat is known as the lye or potash number. Too little lye and the soap won't be properly made. Too much lye and you'll have a whole lot of extra lye left over, which is definitely not good for your skin. So it's important to get the right amount of each ingredient. In this case, we're using a 1-to-1 ratio of fat to lye by weight. Now, you probably think that soap comes from them fancy factories downtown with big machines and more chemicals than you can shake a stick at. Once the mixture is cool enough to touch, you can remove the pot from the stove and let it sit for a few hours. As the soap cools, it'll harden and become ready to cut. When it's done, you can scrape it out of the pot and cut it up into bars. To make sure you have evenly sized bars, use a kitchen scale to weigh out the soap before cutting. Once the bars are cut, it's time to cure them. Curing is a process where the soap is allowed to sit in a well-ventilated area for several weeks. During this time, the soap will harden and the glycerin will continue to be absorbed into the soap. Curing also helps to remove any excess water from the soap, making it last longer. To cure your soap, simply lay the bars flat on a rack in a well-ventilated area. They'll be ready to use in about 4 to 6 weeks. And while that's true for them store-bought soaps, here we're making it the old-fashioned way, the way our grandfathers did when they first set foot on this blessed land. We'll show you how to turn animal fat and lye into a bar of soap that'll make you smell better than a field of fresh-picked lilacs. All you need is 2 ingredients. The first, of course, is the fat. We got ourselves a nice slice of hog lard right here, fresh from the butcher, and don't you go judging us, city slicker. That hog lard is full of vitamins and nutrients that'll leave your skin softer than a baby's backside. Not to mention, it's easier on the environment than all those nasty chemicals you find in store-bought soap. Our second ingredient is lye. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lye sounds like something you drain your pipes with, or maybe the cleaning agent that they use to whitewash them prison walls. Well, both the uses for lye are true, but here we're using it for its most important purpose, soap making. Lye, or sodium hydroxide, is a chemical that's been used to make soap for thousands of years. When mixed with fat, it creates a reaction that forms soap and glycerin. The glycerin is great for your skin, and the soap, well, it cleanses and lathers like nothing you've ever tried before. Plus, it's cheap and easy to find. You can pick it up at any general store. Just ask for some drain cleaner. Let's get to it. Now, this here is a cast iron pot. All right, now that we got our ingredients, let's get to work. While the mixture is cooling, let's talk about the process of saponification. As the mixture cools, you'll start to see it thicken. That's when you know the saponification process is starting to take place. While the soap is curing, let's talk about the history of soap making. Now that your soap is cured, it's time to give it a try. And that's it, folks. Homemade soap that's better than anything you'll find in the stores. They say the mountains are calling, and I hear them. But what if the mountains don't have anything to say? What if they just want to drag you up to the cold wind and the empty space and the loneliness? And sure enough, it started coming down about 7:30 this morning, so I'm not even gonna bother with the stove inside. When I tell you it's wet, I mean it's wet. There were waterfalls coming off the sides of the mountains. The trails were muddy, slippery, a man tied to a post, another pointing fingers. Maybe someone got caught rustling cattle. Maybe someone cheated at cards. Or maybe someone just didn't like the way he looked at their sister. You peek from the window of your lodging. The moon casts a pale sheen over the street. Faces gather like shadows. No one wants to be the first to speak. He said, "How far up did you make it?" And I said, "Oh, we just hiked to the bottom of the canyon. We didn't go up." And he said, "Well, you're missing the best part. The best is up here." And I thought about it. I think he's right. I think the best is above us right now. Not the view, not the weather, not the hike, but the kindness of strangers. Because when you on the road and you sleeping in your car or camping out in the desert, you meet all kinds of interesting people. Some of them just want to talk. Others want to help. And that's what happened yesterday. We pulled into the trailhead parking lot and we saw this guy with a truck, and he'd been eyeing us for a while. And when we got out of the car, he comes over and he says, "You guys need any help getting your gear down into the canyon? It's quite a ways down." And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be really helpful." And so he grabs our bags and he starts walking towards the trail and he's like, "Hey, I'll meet you down there in a few minutes." And we thought, okay, cool. Thanks for the help. But we started hiking down, and within a few minutes, we heard voices coming from above, and we looked up, and there was our angel in disguise coming down the hill, not just with our stuff, but with two other couples who also needed a ride. And so he shuttles us all down to the bottom of the canyon, and he even gives us water. And I mean, we've met a lot of people like this on the road. There's a lot of good people out there. We're lucky to know that. Then someone shouts, "String him up," and the tension snaps. It feels like the tent is vibrating. I haven't seen a tent this wet and not feel concerned about it before. But I think it's okay. I mean, I think we're gonna be fine. But I also realize that our van is parked on a little patch of dirt surrounded by sagebrush, and if we get much more rain, we're gonna be stuck. We're gonna have to wait for the ground to dry out before we can drive anywhere. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But I am prepared. I mean, I brought a book. I brought a deck of cards. We can play cribbage. We've got games. We can play Yahtzee. I mean, we're gonna be fine, I hope. Well, actually, we'll be fine either way. We're not too worried about it. Rope is always nearby. Someone always knows how to tie a noose. There might be a quick trial, words muttered, accusations made, but often the decision was made long before. You look away not because you're afraid, but because you're tired. Tired of watching the world end this way. Tired of knowing that if your luck shifted just slightly, that could be you. The next morning, there is nothing but boot prints in the dust and a silence so deep it hums. We had to hop over creeks and streams that were running with water. No slow draw duels. No 10 paces in turn. More often, it was a drunk man's insult, a quick reach for a hidden revolver. We gotta get to the car before dark. So we're pushing along. It's not too bad. We're kind of used to walking now. We're breaking in our new boots. We're not worried about the rain. We're not worried about the darkness. We're just taking it easy. If I could describe this hike in one word, it would be slippery. I mean, the rocks are wet, the ground is soft. It's not like normal soil. It's like mint. So we're just picking our way down the mountain. And then the sharp, ear-ringing crack of a single shot. Sometimes it ended with a body in the dirt, sometimes with two. Other times it just ended with silence, a cold stare, a hand lingering near the hip, and the slow backing away of someone who didn't want to die that day. And still, you stayed. Because the lawlessness was part of the land, stitched into every timber and trail. You learned to read the room the way you'd read the sky, look for storms, trust your gut, and always keep one eye open at night. Even justice out here was just another thing you had to survive. I couldn't imagine trying to do this hike in the summer when the snow melts. But we reached this one spot and it was like being in a fairy tale. Here we are in this narrow gorge between two walls of rock. And the water was churning and frothing, flowing fast. We could feel the power of the river, but we were safe up on top. I asked my wife, I said, "Can you believe that everywhere we go, there's water?" And she said, "Well, it does start with water." And I thought about it. She's right. Everything starts with water. Life starts with water. Our planet started with water. Without water, we'd all be dead. And so I feel like the more time we spend near water, the healthier we feel. I mean, look at the crazy stuff that happens in our lives. And when you compare that to the elemental forces of nature, it all seems so small, so insignificant. I mean, what's the point of getting overwhelmed by life when there's all this beauty surrounding us? I told her I wanted to move here, but she laughed and pointed out that I've said that about every place we've visited this year, and she's right. I've said that about every place we've been. And I realized I'm actually looking for something, some feeling that I can't put into words. But it has nothing to do with where we are. I'm just gonna keep my coffee going here outside. This morning I woke up and I could hear thunder off in the distance, and I knew we were in for some rain. And sure enough, it started coming down about 7:30 this morning. Now, I'm not much of a rain camper. I mean, I guess it's okay if it's just sprinkling and you can sit outside and watch the clouds roll by. But we're out here for a week. I mean, it's supposed to rain for 3 days straight, so I brought a tent, but I hate being inside tents. I mean, I guess if it's sprinkling and you've got a floor, it's not that bad. But out here, it's a different story. It's not just the environment that could kill you out here. It was justice, if you could call it that. It came fast. It came loud. And sometimes it didn't come at all. The sheriff might have been a former outlaw himself, the judge. A traveling man with a creased coat, a flask in his pocket, and a quick hand with a gavel. Out on the frontier, justice wasn't laid out in careful deliberation. It was swung from a tree limb or settled over a poker table. I've got my hat and gloves on. I've got a jacket on, but I'm really not that cold. This morning, I was thinking about how privileged we are to be out here in this beautiful country. Just look around you. Look at this valley. Look at the way the clouds are rolling in. These mountains are ancient. I mean, they're older than the dinosaurs. So many of our national parks are known for a particular feature, whether it's the geysers at Yellowstone, the canyons at Zion, the trees at Redwood. But here, the mountains are just the mountains, and yet that's why we're here. We love the wild places, the wild spaces, the mountains just being the mountains. That's something worth preserving. Now, I'm not much of a rain camper. I mean, I guess it's okay if it's just sprinkling and you can sit outside and watch the clouds roll by. But we're out here for a week. I mean, it's supposed to rain for 3 days straight. So I brought a tent, but I hate being inside tents. But this one's big enough for both of us and the dogs. So now I've got everything staged out front, like I set up my chair. I got my coffee pot hanging over the fire, and I got these 2 big pots full of water that I filled up yesterday. They're not boiling, but they're heated up pretty good. I'm fixing us some breakfast burritos, which is one of our favorite things to do out here. Scrambled eggs, sausage, cheese, beans, tomatoes, salsa, onions, potatoes. We're doing the whole bit. We drove up into the hills yesterday, which was great. We took the dogs. They loved it. But today, well, it's hard to get out of bed. After days of hiking, my legs and my hips are stiff, so we're gonna have a little camp day here. I woke up and I could hear thunder off in the distance. And I knew we were in for some rain. And yeah, it's chilly. The temperature dropped last night below freezing, but it's warm enough in the tent that I'm comfortable. The rain let up some this afternoon, so we went for a hike to a place called the Narrows. Last night, we found a great spot to watch the meteor shower. Imagine waking to shouting in the middle of the night, boots pounding against the dry boards of a saloon porch. Gunfights weren't common, not like in the stories, but when they happened, they were sudden. Well, we're packed up. It's drizzling a little bit. We got a couple miles to hike today. When we arrived at the trailhead yesterday, we met a guy who was hiking up. As I sit here writing this, it's raining sideways. Thanks for coming along today. And if you want to see more of our adventures, please subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, what's the loneliest place you've ever been? How long could you last all by yourself? In this week's episode, we asked, how long could you last alone in the wilderness? So let's talk about it. How would you survive? Out on the frontier, there's a kind of silence that doesn't exist anywhere else. Not peaceful, not meditative, just empty. A silence so wide it swallows even your thoughts. No wagons clattering. Your cabin is sturdy, your pantry well stocked, and the nearest wild animal is a few miles away. The same worn spoon scraping the same tin plate. Days were filled with chores. And sometimes the only thing to break the silence was the creak of a saddle as a traveler passed by, and even then, they rarely stopped. Trust was hard won out here. A stranger could be a preacher, a hatter, a peddler, or a horse thief. Before leaving the frontier, there are plenty of stories of homesteaders who gave up and moved back east. Out on the frontier, you couldn't run from your problems. Out in the quiet, you couldn't blame anyone else for your problems. In his novel Blood Meridian, the main character, the kid, travels with a gang of Indian scalpers. He witnesses horrible things and does terrible things himself. But after it's over, he survives, which is surprising. Well, you do the same things you do to take care of your body. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider checking out our written stories. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Stay active. Find things to occupy your mind, distract yourself from the silence, but it won't be easy. In fact, it will be the hardest thing you've ever done, and there's no guarantee you'll make it through unscathed. But if you do, you'll emerge changed. You'll have stared into the abyss and found nothing but yourself, and that's worth knowing. The kid is barely a teenager, yet he seems unchanged by what he's seen. Perhaps it's because he never really had a choice. He was thrown into this world, and now he's a part of it. He has to be self-sufficient, resourceful, ruthless. He has to adapt, otherwise he'll be lost. In Blood Meridian, McCarthy writes, he had crossed the river and come into the state of being he had been born into. All his life he had been moving in the direction of the sunset toward the place from which he had come. But now the road lay behind him and the mountains ahead, and he was going home. If you were hungry, it was because you hadn't planted a garden or hunted. If you were cold, it was because you didn't mend the roof or stack enough wood by the door. Everything you needed was inside you, and that meant everything you needed was forgivable. It's easy to romanticize this, to paint it as this incredible journey of self-discovery, and it was, but it was also hard. People did disappear out on the frontier. They were lost to the vast emptiness of the West. There was nowhere to hide. And eventually, you had to face yourself. It wasn't a battle everyone was willing to fight. Most of them were men. They called themselves tenderfeet and boasted that they could handle themselves. But they didn't realize how much stronger they have to be, not just physically, but mentally. One such man kept a diary while he was out west. But as we close, let's talk about how you would survive alone in the wilderness. We covered the basics already: food, water, shelter. But there's a lot more that goes into it. Experts recommend finding water first, then establishing a base camp. It's important to protect yourself from the elements, but you should also keep busy. That means finding food and collecting firewood. And of course, you need to stay safe. That means protecting yourself from wild animals and making sure your shelter won't collapse or catch fire. He read about the difficulty of chopping wood, the relentless sun, and the strange animals. But more than anything, he read about the silence. Finally, near the end of his journey, he wrote, "The silence drove me nearly insane. Every man should have a companion when he comes out here." His entry ended right there, but no one knows exactly why he left the frontier because the diary was never found. When you finally did see someone, you had to decide if you wanted to risk the isolation again. You fed the chickens, mended fences, chopped wood, and each task was accompanied by a profound silence. Maybe you'd hum to yourself. Maybe you'd recite a story, something half remembered from childhood. Anything to push back the silence that settled into your bones like frost. Fires provided some light and warmth, but they couldn't reach into the corners where shadows gathered. Those were the worst parts because that's where the whispers lived. They sounded like dry leaves scratching on wood or the floorboards groaning, and sometimes they were clear as a bell. They'd say your name. To fill that void, you started talking out loud. At first, it was just to pass the time. You might sing an old song, tell a story, or argue with a politician in the newspaper. But as the weeks turned into months, you started talking to yourself. And if you're honest, it wasn't that strange. After all, who else was there to talk to? There weren't even birds to listen. The settlers often remarked that the silence out west was a living thing, heavy and thick enough to touch, and sometimes painful enough to cut with a knife. They say that it made you question your sanity, so you're safe and you're fed. You're not going to die, but you may go crazy. That sounds dramatic, but it really happened. People did lose their minds on the frontier. Settlers often went weeks without seeing another soul. A neighbor might live 10 miles away, too far to visit without reason, too far to call for help. Eventually, you had to learn to enjoy your own company, or at least tolerate it. No footsteps crunching, just the sound of the wind pushing its way across endless plains, brushing past brittle grass and weathered fence posts. We're used to noise. Even when we want quiet, we'll listen to music or a podcast, or just turn on the TV. But what happens when you're somewhere where you can't escape the quiet? Now, if you're anything like me, you probably think you'd do great on your own out in the wilderness. I mean, sure, it would be a little lonely, but how bad could it really be? Well, it depends. First, you need food, water, and shelter. And you need to stay safe. This is survival 101. But once those basic needs are taken care of, then what? Then you're faced with the consequences of isolation. And this is where things get interesting. It's a question a lot of people have pondered, especially those who make the choice to live in the wilderness or in places where they read completely alone for months or years at a time. These are stories from that life. And today we're going to explore one of the most universal human experiences, loneliness. Let's imagine you're living out on the prairie. Meals were quiet. A pot of beans, maybe stale bread. Mail came rarely. Newspapers were weeks out of date. At night, it was worse. Coyotes howling in the distance, wind rattling the shutters, your own heartbeat the loudest thing for miles. Now, obviously, we don't know how many people lost their minds out west, but we do know that some of them didn't last very long. People aren't always honest about why they leave. Many who returned east claimed it was for financial reasons or family issues, but the truth was harder to admit. For others, though, the silence became a balm. It forced them to look inward. Many writers have explored this idea, but none better than Cormac McCarthy. It as a sad commentary on human nature that sometimes our most personal struggles are best understood through the experiences of strangers. But what about your mind? How do you take care of that? And that ends our discussion for this week. As always, thanks for watching. Out here, life was cheap, land was cheap. If you ever have one, I'm sorry, but if you ever have a bad one, I'm even sorrier because those things hurt. And today, we're talking about the most painful kind of stomachache there is. We'll get to that one, I promise, but we need to set the stage a bit. It was common for someone's stomach to hurt all the time. Settlers often wrote about the pain they felt in their stomachs, but it wasn't always clear why. John Work, who lived in the Oregon Territory during the 1840s, said his stomach never felt well. Like the rest of us, frontier women were constantly trying to keep everything inside their bodies working properly. They worried about their hearts, their lungs, and their bowels. He said, quote, "All are more or less troubled with bowel complaints, which arise from drinking water from brooks, and public health campaigns were launched to raise awareness about how to deal with tainted food. But all of these things take time, and the pioneers didn't have any to spare." Also, fun fact, on March 16, 1917, the United States entered World War I. It was a huge moment in American history. But now I need to ask you for a huge moment in digital press history. Would you click subscribe if you haven't already? Please do it now. Alright, now back to the video. They had cattle to drive, plows to guide, crops to harvest. And so they pushed on, their bellies aching, their backs bent, their eyes focused on the next horizon because giving into pain wasn't an option. They had too far to come. And streams where everything that dies is thrown in and left to decay. Flies, mosquitoes, and other insects breed there in immense quantities and drop into the water. All these things make the water impure and unfit to drink. No wonder so many people get sick. Sarah Royce Bicknell wrote about another woman who worried that her ovaries would fail her. She asked, "Will my monthly messenger prove recreant to its trust?" And when it comes to your plumbing, you really don't want that to happen. There were medications available that dealt specifically with female problems. One popular concoction combined the flowers of the yellow hemp plant, opium, and rhubarb root. But what about the towns that dotted the frontier? Sure, some were boom towns like Virginia City, Nevada, or Deadwood, South Dakota, or Dodge City, Kansas. They were famous for saloons, gambling halls, and gunfights at high noon. But a closer look reveals a lot more. Towns on the frontier were busy, bustling places with schools and churches and even sewage systems. Today, we're gonna take a deeper dive into frontier towns and explore what life was like for the people who lived there. We'll look at how they built their homes, how they supplied themselves with food, and how they kept their businesses booming. Plus, we'll meet some of the colorful characters who populated these towns, from shopkeepers to saloon owners to lawmen. It'll be an adventure, so join us and let's find out what life was like in a typical frontier town. Another combined brandy, saffron, cloves, and fennel. But if your problem was internal bleeding or perhaps a misplaced uterus, then you needed a different sort of treatment. Doctors would use fingers or instruments to try and locate the problem, and then they would dilate the cervix. They might do the same for men whose bladders weren't functioning properly. In either case, it was a painful process. Treatments like these were only available in cities, however, so if you were on the frontier, you were pretty much on your own. And if you had a choice between opium and dilation, you'd probably choose opium. Unfortunately, it was also habit forming. The more people relied on it, the more problems they had. Constipated, sick, diseased, dehydrated, and bloated. He thought he'd be cured if he could find a good physician, while settlers dreamed of lives back east where doctors might be able to solve their stomach problems. They had to live their current lives out west where nature was the only doctor. People continued to push forward into new lands, into new territories, looking for opportunity. Many times they had to walk thousands of miles to reach their destination, and walking like that required food. But eating tainted meat, fruits, or vegetables that had been contaminated by animals, and water that might have come from a carcass-filled stream wasn't exactly healthy, and that meant stomach pain became a constant companion. But instead he found himself bartering for a bottle of salts, which helped for a while before his stomach started hurting again. This was the problem when it came to treating stomach aches. There wasn't a clear cause and there wasn't a clear solution, and this wasn't a problem unique to the frontier. Doctors in the East grappled with the same sorts of problems. In fact, stomach ailments were responsible for roughly 20% of all doctor visits in the 1800s. But as far as country doctors were concerned, a stomach ache was a stomach ache. There was no differentiation between the causes. For many illnesses, the only way to treat them was to bleed the patient or induce vomiting or diarrhea. And each of these treatments sounded like a great idea until you considered what they actually did. Bloodletting made you weaker. Vomiting and diarrhea led to dehydration. Stomach aches were just a fact of life in the 1800s, not only on the frontier, but everywhere. So people treated their own stomach ailments. Some drank peppermint tea or brandy or ground flaxseed. Others preferred salts or milk. Still others preferred vinegar or turpentine. And since pain relievers were out of the question, they tried everything else. Most of the time they came from eating food that went bad. But if you were on the frontier, getting to that doctor was nearly impossible. Stagecoach travel was dangerous and expensive. Riverboats were crowded and uncomfortable. And if you tried traveling by yourself, you might end up dead. After a wagon train, Captain J.C. Stell was troubled by the number of people he saw with stomach aches, which he blamed on drinking water from streams filled with animal carcasses. He recommended that people boil their water first, but that took time, fuel, and energy that most travelers didn't have. So instead, they traded for someone else's opinion. Someone who'd been through this route before, someone who knew the dangers of the trail, someone who probably didn't have a medical degree. What experience matters more than any piece of paper, right? Well, yes, but also no, because sometimes that person would recommend laudanum, a tincture of opium. And opium makes you constipated. Now, I know you've all heard the phrase running your guts out, but imagine the opposite. Imagine being so backed up that you felt like you burst. Imagine feeling like you were carrying two stomachs. Not every family had access to refrigeration, so spoiled milk, stale bread, meats that sat around too long. All of it could go wrong very quickly, especially if your kitchen wasn't separated from the rest of your house. Food would often become infested with mice droppings or cockroach licks or stray hairs. Cleaning food was also a tricky business. Scrubbing boards by hand took a lot of time and energy, and soap wasn't all that effective anyway. Add to that things like ash, which people used to help clean pots, and pans, or plaster, which people ate accidentally after confusing it with flour. And you start to see how contaminated food could be. Once it went bad, though, it went bad fast. Food poisoning, dysentery, typhoid fever, cholera. All of these things could wipe out an entire family in a matter of days. Labor was cheap. When people ate whatever they could, whenever they could, it wasn't uncommon for them to forget they'd eaten at all. But eventually, inevitably, something went bad and then you got the runs. Diarrhea was a common ailment. You could lose several liters of fluid a day, and if you couldn't replace those fluids, well, then you started to die. And pain? Back in the 1800s, people believed that alcohol could cure anything from snake bites to cholera. The only thing was, it usually didn't. Taking a shot of whiskey, however, could make you feel better, at least until you threw up. Well, that was free. It was a currency everyone paid in full measure. But it wasn't always easy to stomach. It's me. Welcome to Life Noggin. Today we're going to talk about stomach aches. Now, along with this problem, you had the problem of food just sitting in your stomach for days. Now, let's take a look at that third item. So when you add food poisoning, diarrhea, and alcohol abuse all together, you get, well, a whole lot of pain. The frontier was different, though. Out here, doctors were hard to come by. Then you had the issue of just getting treatment. Sure, an Eastern city doctor might have had fancy theories about your stomach aches, while on the Oregon Trail, Sarah Royce Bicknell wrote about a woman who suffered from such constipation that she looked ready to burst. But as the saying goes, the show must go on. One man who traveled across the plains in the 1870s described it perfectly. Now, eventually, people did figure out that boiling their water first was probably a good idea. In the end, most of them made it, but not without paying the ultimate price. Hey, that was the end. When you think of frontier life, you usually picture dusty trails and lonely cabins and bison herds stretching as far as the eye could see. Coming soon. The air is heavy with humidity and the buzz of insects. A thin layer of dust covers everything, and as you go about your chores, you kick it up in small, gritty clouds. But does it ever get cleaned? What did frontier people do when they needed to wash up? How did they keep their homes from descending into filth? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to be talking about filth on the American frontier. Coming up, he asks, were chamber pots used or was it the outhouse? I've always wondered. You see, toilets weren't invented until the 1590s, thanks to the work of Sir John Harington. And even after that, they were rare. It would be another 3 centuries before indoor plumbing became common in Europe and America. For most of history, people either used a hole dug in the ground or a bucket to deal with human waste. He asks, how did people keep their homes from being completely overrun by rodents and insects? Spiders, mice, and ants were common household guests. Rodents in particular made themselves at home in the walls, under the floors, and anywhere else they could hide. Now, the best way to stop rodents was to keep your food supplies in airtight containers. But even so, they could find their way into your home, and they often left droppings or chewed through your belongings. To combat rodents, people used poisons, traps, and even cats. Cats were usually more effective at hunting mice than getting rid of them entirely, but they did help. Keeping screens on windows was one way to keep bugs out of the house, but they were expensive and they didn't always fit properly. Plus, open windows were necessary during the summer months to catch any scrap of breeze you could. But screens or no screens, bugs made their way inside. Flies buzzed around your head as you ate. Roaches scuttled across the floor, and mosquitoes bit exposed skin. People dealt with flies by swatting them. And most families kept a fly swatter handy. As for roaches and rodents, there was little you could do. The best strategy was to kill them when you saw them. If you were feeling ambitious, you might try to block up cracks and holes during the warmer months. That way you limited where they could nest. But ultimately, rodents and bugs were part of frontier life. But during the 18th century, a new option emerged, the outhouse. An outhouse was basically a box with a seat attached to a swinging bucket that could be lowered into a hole dug in the ground. So while it might make us queasy today, frontier folks just shrugged and carried on. Thank you all for watching. And thank you to our community for asking these questions. We couldn't answer them without you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to send us your own questions, you can visit our website and click the Ask Us Anything link. Until next time, remember, history is everywhere. When you needed to use the facilities, you went out to the outhouse, sat down, and did your business into the bucket. Then you either pulled the bucket back up with you or someone else retrieved it and emptied it into a designated spot on the ground. Outhouses were popular in wealthier homes because they cost money. As for the poor, they often used chamber pots. In fact, most families used both methods. Chamber pots were easy to use and convenient, especially during the winter months when people didn't want to trudge out to an outhouse in the cold. Plus, chamber pots were portable. When you were done using them, you could empty them out the window or carry them outside and dump them somewhere. Families might designate a particular spot, or the waste would just pile up in front of the house. Either way, these two systems overlapped. In practice, children sometimes emptied chamber pots out the window, but they might also run out to the yard with a bucket from the outhouse. All in all, it was gross, but it was also normal. In today's episode, we are answering questions from our community. Our first question comes from our community member, Jay Bird. She asked, did frontiersmen bathe and how often? And if they wore anything on the bottom half, it was just a loincloth or a leather kilt. Now, there were a few reasons for this. First of all, linen and cotton underwear were expensive. Like we've said before, frontiersmen preferred practicality over fashion. Besides, underwear was associated with women. When men dressed in layers, it was usually with wool, as wool helped keep them warm in the winter months. Sometimes they wore a waistcoat or a coat, but as far as underwear goes, not only was it unnecessary, but it was feminine. Underwear was another one of those things that got in the way of work, so most men left that to women. Now, this doesn't mean that they didn't have underwear, but it was definitely not a daily thing. If they had some, they probably wore it on particularly hot days or if they wanted to avoid chafing. But generally speaking, frontiersmen didn't wear underwear. There was no set schedule for bathing among frontier people. Some bathed weekly or bi-weekly, others only when it was absolutely necessary. Bathing was more about removing dirt than soaping up. Most people didn't bring soap along on the frontier. It was heavy and expensive. Removing dirt, however, was important. Not only was it an aesthetic concern, but people knew that a good cleaning could prevent illnesses like typhoid fever and dysentery. But even those who bathed regularly had to contend with the reality of living on the frontier. You might scrub up in the late afternoon, but by nightfall, you'd be caked in meaty animal hair, dried sweat, and whatever else the day threw at you. Furthermore, water wasn't always available. During the dry summer months, many families conserved water so carefully that they didn't use it for cleaning. Instead, they relied on techniques like the Wabanaki. Native Americans showed European settlers when to use a wet cloth and then pack it around your body like a tight dress. This allowed some measure of evaporation before the cloth became soaked through and could be re-wetted. That said, some families could take full baths, but they were few and far between. If you had a proper bathhouse with a tub, that's where you would heat water and drop in a bit of homemade or store-bought soap. Perhaps you could use this for a cleansing scrub. A bit of lye soap and a stiff brush would remove dirt and dead skin, though it wouldn't leave you smelling like roses. Once or twice a week, if you were lucky, you might take a bath. Many people on the frontier took what was called a sponge bath instead. We think of sponges as lightweight, airy things. We don't associate them with anything dirty or gross. But the frontier sponge was usually a rough washcloth tied to a stick. With this, you could scrub yourself and reach all the nooks and crannies without having to lean over a tub or bucket. This method required very little water, too. The stick sponge also meant that you could scrub your back and other hard-to-reach places, which prevented sores and skin infections. Finally, a stick sponge saved you from having to ask someone else to wash your back. And since privacy was already a rare commodity, few people asked others to clean them. Most frontier folks washed themselves. If you were lucky enough to have a bathtub, you might add a bit of lye soap and give yourself a scrub. Then you would pour the dirty water into a bucket and save it for cleaning the rest of your body. Scrub it thoroughly with a stiff brush or a stick sponge. The water would be warm at best, but it would feel hot compared to the temperature of your body. After rinsing off, you would save the water in the bucket and put it to good use washing your hair, scrubbing floors, and so on. So while people did bathe on the frontier, it wasn't exactly a daily affair. More often than not, people simply kept themselves as clean as they could within the constraints of frontier life. Our next question comes from our community member, Ben. On the frontier, bathroom habits depended on where you lived and how much money you had. Our next question comes from our community member, Jacob. He asks, did frontiersmen wear underwear? Most men wear nothing under their breeches except for a basic white undershirt. Our next question comes from our community member, Chuck. Unfortunately for frontier dwellers, rodent and insect infestations were practically impossible to avoid. In fact, most families learned to live alongside critters of all kinds. Frontier life was filthy, uncomfortable, and downright gross at times. But the people who lived it developed strategies to cope with the mess. When the sun hasn't risen yet, I know my day has begun. The cabin is still and gray. The hearth is cold, my breath like smoke, each word untethered and loud in the silence. My morning has begun. The firewood must be fetched and chopped. The sourdough starter already alive and needs to be fed. The baby might stir any moment now. Slow starts aren't an option. In this life, we are always already late. It is impossible to wake gently when your life begins before the dawn. And if tomorrow I have to face the whispers, then so be it. I will mend the tear in the sleeve, relearn the verse of Psalm 23, and I will walk back into the gray, my chin lifted, looking my accusers in the eye. I watch the shadows play on the cabin walls, listen to the wind outside, knowing my husband is listening too. A hemline too high, a button undone, a woman might be shamed, whispered about, or worse, depending on the town's mood. I have seen it happen. I have heard her name called out in the street. I have seen men point and stare. I have seen other women look away. I had to look clean, even when I couldn't be. It is easier to stitch by lamp than by fire, easier to scrub a dress until its owner forgets it was ever soiled. Sometimes the only other voice I heard was the wind in the grass or the creak of the barn door. I heal others with poultices made from herbs I memorized, told stories by firelight, soothed children through sickness, and remembered the birthdays no one else did. I planted the potatoes and the squash, hung the beef to cure, counted the jars of preserves, mended the fence after the cattle broke through, kept house and raised young, tended the dying. We kept our hurts inside, stitched them up with needle and thread, covered them with flour and cornstarch, whatever it took. We didn't talk about the beatings or the whisperings or the times the preacher's son laid his hand on our shoulder and never let go. We learned to read by the light of the kerosene lamp while our children slept. We wrote stories that no one asked for, poems that poured from our souls, songs that echoed across the prairie. Quietly, fiercely female, my story isn't over. We wanted to be heard, we wanted to be seen, but most of all, we wanted to be known, not by a long shot. I still have miles to roam, decades to live, mountains to climb. We were leaders and scholars, poets and politicians, romancers and rebels. We were pioneers, homesteaders, fortune hunters, farmers, preachers, shopkeepers. We were washerwomen and murderers. But I wanted you to know what it was like for a woman like me. My thoughts stayed with me, locked behind silent chores and long sighs. We were everything you didn't want us to be. We were everything you feared we would become. The hearth is cold, my breath like smoke, each word untethered and loud in the silence. My morning has begun. We were wild, untamed, unhinged, and there was nothing you could do to stop us. No one sees me here. No one judges the way a seamstress judged my mother for a hemline a hand too high. We don't speak, but we are both listening for the sound that will come. Most mornings it is a wolf, rarely faint. And in the morning we woke up anyway and got to work. But the cabin stood because I kept it warm. The children grew because I fed them first. The husband survived because I bore the burden without complaint. But before I go out into the gray, I steal one more moment. In the flickering lantern light, the work goes faster. We knew where the lost lamb was hiding, how to set a broken bone, how to read the tracks in the mud. We could throw a saddle on a horse and wrangle calves, though our hands were soft from spinning and our nails were chipped from scrubbing. We could kill a snake and pluck a chicken, get a fish and feed its heart to the cat. We could do anything we needed to do. His meals, his comfort, his voice at the dinner table. If I were unmarried, I would be a servant in another household or considered odd. If I were widowed, I might run the farm, but only at the cost of my body, my sleep, and my reputation. Here in the dark, I am safe. I am who I want to be. I do what I need to do. Drying, heating, and pouring that much water took hours. And modesty was strict. Even among sisters, we bathed in shifts one at a time with blankets hung for privacy. Lye soap stung raw skin, especially when my hands were already cracked from cold or harsh labor. Some days even the thought of water sent shivers down my spine. I cook and I clean. I patch clothes by lantern light, thread I might have traded for eggs. And in between those quiet, endless tasks, I gave birth without help, buried children with my own hands, and kept going anyway. There was no true rest. If I were married, my husband's needs would come first. Washing was rare and not just for lack of water. Clothing, too, wasn't comfort. It was armor against judgment. And isolation, that was the deepest cut of all. Some mornings, I didn't see another woman for days. Letters came slowly, if at all. Yet even in that silence I work. Rarely was I praised. This wasn't the West of adventure. It was the West of persistence. We woke before the sun. Our bodies knew how to get the fire started, how to find the right stick to poke the ashes just so. And sometimes, if the night was quiet and the moon was full, we dreamed of satin slippers and waltzes and gilded halls, or maybe we dreamed of nothing at all. We were strong and silent and very good at keeping secrets. Our greatest sin was wanting something more, a schoolhouse for our children, books with more than one sentence, a stage where we could perform, an audience for our stories, a listening ear. We built towns, sewed quilts, birthed babies, and buried the dead. We led prayer circles and quilting bees. We were mothers, daughters, sisters, wives. We were gossips and dreamers, teachers and healers. Oh, yes, we were everything you didn't expect us to be. We were women. And when the sun hasn't risen yet, I know my day has begun. The cabin is still in gray, and I have miles to roam, decades to live, mountains to climb. Pain is everywhere. For some, it's a constant companion, whether from ailments that modern medicine can treat or injuries that weren't their fault. Today we're answering a very special listener question from Sarah. She asked us to do an episode on pain in the Wild West. Now when I think of the Wild West, I think of cowboys and Indians, of gunfights at high noon, and stagecoaches thundering across the plains. I think of saloons filled with rowdy cowboys drinking whiskey, smoking cigars, and spitting tobacco juice into spittoons. You might visit a general store owner, a traveling salesman, or even a barber, hoping they could help with your ailment. People turn to traditional remedies passed down through generations or treatments, recommended by traveling salesmen peddling miracle cures. Some remedies were based on local plants and herbs, while others were concocted from a mix of alcohol, vinegar, and other household items. Common treatments included drinking vinegar and water for a stomachache, applying poultices of mud or leaves to treat skin ailments, or gargling with salt water for a sore throat. Without access to modern medical care, complications during childbirth were common and often resulted in injury or even death. For every story of pain and suffering, there were countless acts of bravery, resilience, and hope. Despite the odds stacked against them, the pioneers of the Wild West pressed on. They explored new lands, built communities, and carved out a life in the face of adversity. Their stories remind us that no matter how difficult our circumstances may seem, we have the strength within us to endure and overcome. Today, we have the privilege of accessing advanced medical care that was once unimaginable. Pain is universal. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. We all experience pain at some point in our lives, but it's in the way we choose to respond to pain that truly defines us. Will we succumb to it, or will we rise above it? Will we help others in pain or ignore their suffering? The choices we make in the face of pain can define not only our own lives, but the lives of those around us. Let us also take a moment to honor the courage and resilience of those who came before us. They endured unimaginable pain and suffering, yet they persevered. Their stories should inspire us to keep pushing forward in our own battles with pain and suffering. Women were forced to rely on the assistance of other women, midwives, or family members with little to no formal training in obstetrics. The lack of clean water, proper nutrition, and medical equipment made childbirth a risky endeavor. And while midwives were often well-meaning and knowledgeable, they too were limited by the constraints of the time period. Have you ever experienced a pain that you thought would never end? We'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Religion provided a sense of comfort and hope in times of suffering, and many turned to God for solace and strength. While these treatments may have provided some relief, they were often a hit or miss and sometimes even dangerous. They might suggest a tonic made of alcohol and various herbs, which may or may not have helped your current problem, but would almost certainly get you drunk. Neighbors help neighbors, sharing resources and providing support in times of need. In the absence of modern medical care, this sense of community was vital for survival. Or perhaps they'd recommend lancing a boil or setting a bone, procedures that, while necessary, were performed without anesthesia. We have access to modern painkillers, antibiotics, and highly trained medical professionals. Yet it is important to remember that our current understanding of pain and health is the result of countless discoveries and innovations by those who came before us. The pioneers of the Wild West, with their limited medical knowledge, still managed to develop coping mechanisms and treatments that help them endure. Their stories are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Many pioneers traveled with the frontier dentist, a traveling professional who would set up shop wherever he could find customers. When a tooth needed pulling, the procedure was performed using little more than a pair of pliers and a lot of grit. Imagine having a tooth pulled with nothing to dull the pain and no guarantee of proper sterilization. It sounds absolutely terrifying. Imagine having a bone set without painkillers. Just thinking about it makes me wince. To me, the Wild West is synonymous with adventure, excitement, and danger. But beneath the surface of this rugged frontier lifestyle lurked a harsh reality, a world where pain was a daily companion. Accidents, falls, and animal bites were frequent, leaving many with physical wounds that could become infected and lead to further pain and suffering. Surgeons were in short supply, and those who did perform surgeries were not necessarily qualified. In fact, barbers were often called upon to assist in more ways than one. The tools of the trade for a barber were pretty similar to those of a surgeon, so they were often asked to lend a hand when a surgery was needed. Imagine having your appendix operation performed by a man whose expertise was cutting hair. Not exactly reassuring. Yet we often try to ignore it, push through it, hide it away until it goes away. But what if pain was all you knew? What if you didn't know anything else? What would that world look like? Welcome to Life Noggin. In the lawless frontier of the 1800s, life was a gamble and pain was the currency. The vast unsettled territories spanning from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean were home to a diverse range of hardy pioneers. Farmers, miners, ranchers, traders, and adventurers. These individuals braved the harsh environment, and for those unfortunate enough to fall sick or injured, pain became a way of life. There was a severe shortage of licensed physicians willing to practice in the frontier. Those who did practice out west often lacked proper training or education. This resulted in ineffective and sometimes harmful treatments. Now today, our understanding of pain has evolved significantly. We recognize that pain is more than just a physical sensation. It is a complex interplay of psychological and emotional responses that can be just as debilitating as it is physical. But back then, medical understanding was rudimentary at best. Pain was seen as a punishment, a sign of weakness, or simply an unavoidable part of living. Doctors were scarce, so those who ventured west often did so knowing they'd be on their own when it came to dealing with pain and illness. The lack of medical professionals wasn't because there weren't any doctors around. In fact, the opposite was true. Let's say you were feeling a bit under the weather. If you lived in the Wild West, it was essential to be self-sufficient and resourceful when it came to dealing with pain. But it wasn't just illnesses that caused pain. Injuries were also a common occurrence on the frontier. Extracting a tooth was another painful experience that was often put off due to the lack of dental professionals. For women on the frontier, childbirth was an especially fraught experience. As we come to the end of this journey through the world of pain in the Wild West, I want you to remember this. The frontier was a lonely and unforgiving place, but the spirit of community was strong. Today we live in a time where medical science has advanced significantly. One way they coped was through religion. The frontier was largely settled by Christian missionaries who placed a strong emphasis on faith and prayer. As we reflect on the lives of those who lived in the Wild West, let us take a moment to appreciate the progress that has been made in the field of medicine. Whether it's supporting research for new pain management techniques or simply lending a listening ear to someone in pain, we can all play a role in making the world a little less painful for everyone. We're at the end of our journey today, but the lessons we've learned here will stay with me long after the credits roll. So, do you have a pain or illness that you'd like to see us cover in the future? And as always, if you enjoyed learning something new today, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fun facts. Thanks for watching.
No priest, no choir, often not even a coffin, just the sound of wind weaving through sagebrush, the creak of worn boots, shifting weight on dry soil, a wooden plank with a name, if there was time to carve it, and the hollow thud of earth landing atop pine or canvas. Death on the frontier was common, but never familiar. It came from fever, from snake bite, from childbirth, from a from falling from a horse, from the wrong meal, or from the weather itself. It came quickly, quietly, and it did not discriminate. If someone died in town, there might be a small gathering, and the wind would remember, even if no one else did. They walked these plains, these prairies, these wild and rugged mountains. They lived, they loved, they lost, and they are now a part of this land, a whisper in the grasses, a memory on the breeze. Just as the sun sets on another day, we recall those who found peace in the arms of the everlasting West. As the last rays of sunlight surrender to the darkness, we release our stories, our hopes, and our dreams into the embrace of the eternal West. May their souls find solace in the grand tapestry of the cosmos, forever entwined with the untamed beauty of the Wild West. They are gone, yet their spirits linger, woven into the fabric of this wild, untamed land. Neighbors would come in their Sunday best, hats off, eyes lowered. The dead were washed in cold water, dressed in their finest, sometimes just wrapped in a blanket if no clothing was left whole. Their stories, like the stars, are timeless, their courage echoing through the ages. Just as the river flows, their spirits flowed through the West, shaping its destiny and leaving an indelible mark on its soul. Though they may be gone, their adventurous spirit continues to inspire, reminding us that the West is forever a realm of endless possibility. Under this endless sky, their legacy lives on, carried by the wind, etched in stone, and cherished in our hearts. There was no embalming. The burial had to be quick. Graves were dug with shovels and hands, simple, shallow, sometimes ringed with stones to keep coyotes from digging. Its goodbyes were rough-hewn, private, and fleeting. A few words, a wooden marker, maybe a flower from a child's hand, wilting fast in the sun. But somehow that was enough. If the ground was frozen, they'd pile rocks instead. If the person was known, someone might say a few words, something brief, something hopeful. If not, there might only be silence. On lonely homesteads, when someone passed, a wife, a child, a friend, the burial could be even more solitary. Just one man with a shovel and his grief. A cross fashioned from fence posts. A prayer whispered to the empty sky. Cemeteries came later. Once towns had permanence. Until then, the land itself held the memories. And still, life went on. Crops needed planting, cattle needed tending. The rhythm of survival didn't pause even for sorrow. Mourning had to be brief, efficient, folded into the long work of simply staying alive. Some wrote letters to loved ones back east. Many never arrived. Others carved initials in tree bark or left a hat hanging on a post. The dead were often buried near where they lived. Small, wind-swept plots at the edge of farms, hillsides under big skies, or shaded by cottonwoods near streams. The Wild West did not offer grand tombstones or black veils and marble angels. Out there beneath the stars, a quiet grave meant something. It meant you'd lived, you'd worked, you'd mattered to someone. As the wind softens and the fire crackles low, let us remember those whose lives ended beneath a boundless sky. In the hush of twilight, as the campfire's glow fades, we pause to honor the pioneers, the dreamers, the souls who found solace in this vast expanse. Now, as the night deepens and the stars ignite, we share stories of those who dared to roam free, wild and untethered. And so we gather around the fading embers, united in remembrance and gratitude for those who found their forever home in the arms of the Wild West.
That was a snippet from a popular YouTube channel, reading of one of my very favorite pieces of writing of all time, A Day in the Wild West. And it was this video right here. This is the third time I've listened to this. The first time I did when it came out, then again a few weeks later. And now, because it's Friday, I get to listen to it for the third time. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend it. This requires sacrificing some of your immediate comfort and security for the chance of greater rewards down the line. I mention all this because after playing Civilization 6 recently, I remembered a game I played years ago called Dwarf Fortress. I took advantage of his presence to find out how well I was doing compared to other fortresses in the game. I poured hundreds of hours into building this fortress and it still wasn't special. I could see what it was like and how it worked and what its potential was. I needed to remember every detail of this fortress and the dwarves that live there. Now, when I open this fortress, I'm transported back in time. I can see how this community lived and what it accomplished, and understand the lives of the individuals who made it possible. While this fortress might not have been special by the standards of the game or the history it draws inspiration from, it's very special to me. This is the culmination of hundreds of hours of my life and countless decisions that only I could have made. Even if nobody else will ever know about it or care about it, it doesn't matter, because when I'm here, it's real. When I'm here, this is history, and I have brought it back to life. So I open the game's D key interface, which allows you to tag important objects and events with written notes. I tagged every workshop, stockpile, bedroom, and room with a note describing what it was used for, why it was important, and who had helped build it. I wrote histories of each dwarf, their achievements, flaws, quirks, and family tree. I even wrote a summary of the fortress's history up to that point, and I put it all into a massive central memorial room. Because of the hard work of the developers and the efforts of the players, this dwarf fortress was keeping the memory of a long-dead culture alive. I realized then that maybe being mediocre was okay. Maybe the purpose of this game wasn't to achieve greatness, but to experience something that otherwise would have been lost forever. But then I thought about what it would have been like for the real dwarves whose descendants I was playing as. Their world had collapsed thousands of years ago. Even if they had achieved the greatest heights possible for their civilization at the time, they wouldn't have been remembered by anyone today. There would be no legends about them because there would be no one left to pass those stories down to. They would be dead, gone, and utterly forgotten. He told me that while my fortress was reasonably prosperous, there were others that were doing much better. They had vast stockpiles of luxury goods. Their workshops turned out double or triple the finished products per day, and their defenses were so thick and tall that even angry elephants couldn't break them down. I learned that my production and wealth and defense were all lower than average. I wasn't doing badly, but I wasn't doing well either. I was, in fact, mediocre. Unlike Civ 6, which simulates the rise and fall of entire civilizations over thousands of years, Dwarf Fortress focuses on a single fortress, one small community of dwarves struggling to survive in an unforgiving underground world. His ratings are so good, and this piece just takes you right there. It's such an incredible piece of writing. So I built basic living spaces for my dwarves, set up workshops and a stockpile for food and valuables, and tried to keep everyone alive. After several in-game years of struggling to barely scrape by, my dwarven fortress was finally starting to thrive. My dwarves were producing luxury goods, rare artworks, and weapons of war. My fortress walls were thicker and my defenses more numerous, and my food stores overflowed with grain. I know we've all gotten used to the idea of people doing voices in imitation of real people, but this was done before that was commonplace. And also, I think it's really funny because of the popularity of iVoices, how he titled this video, A Voice Will Read CWSCU. So let's go ahead and get into it. In the 2017 update to their game, Civilization 6, Firaxis Games included a new victory condition called a culture victory. For a culture victory, you don't need to conquer other civilizations or even engage in diplomacy. Instead, your aim is to produce great works of art, scientific discoveries, and archaeological wonders that make your civilization stand out among the rest. Some of these can be created by your scientists, some by your artists, and some, like public spaces or government buildings, need to be constructed by your builders. In order to bring them about, each wonder of the world you construct or discovery you make fills up a gauge at the top of the screen. When the gauge is full, you win the game and earn the title of a culture winner. But winning a culture victory isn't easy. To make progress towards it, you need to build cities with great architecture and public works. You need to discover new things about the world. You need to found religions and write history books. Each of these endeavors requires citizens with special skills, people who are better than average at making discoveries or creating art or improving city infrastructure. Unfortunately, people like that aren't usually born in the city centers where most of the action happens. Rather, they tend to pop up in villages and resource-rich countryside that hasn't yet been fully developed. And that means, in order to win a culture victory, you need to invest resources into building up the parts of your empire that are immediately useful or pleasant to live in It's a lot like real life. To achieve great things, you have to take risks and explore new ideas. When I first started playing the game, I had no idea what I was doing. One day, a visitor arrived at my fortress seeking to trade. This made me sad at first. But now here I was, sitting in front of a computer screen, experiencing this lost civilization more viscerally than anyone ever had. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to preserve everything I had. It took several days to do, but once I finished, I felt like an archaeologist who had just uncovered a lost civilization. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, or commenting with video suggestions. See you next time.